Hello and welcome to India Business Hour. I'm Parikshit Luthra. Ritu Singh joins me from our Mumbai studios, and our top story tonight. The world's rich and powerful have arrived at Davos in Switzerland for the annual World Economic Forum, which officially kicks off tomorrow. The chaos over Brexit, slowing growth in China, globalization and free trade will dominate conversations over the next few days. Meanwhile, the International Monetary Fund expects all the above triggers to take a hit on global growth in the next 2 years. The IMF has trimmed its global growth forecast by 20 basis points to 3.5% for 2019 and by 10 basis points and 3.6% for 2020. It, however, retained its India forecast at 7.3%. Shireen Bhan joins us from Davos now with a very special guest. Over to you, Shireen.
Our continuous coverage here from the World Economic Forum in Davos is on, and joining us now is the Chief Economist of the IMF, Geeta Gopinath, making her first appearance here at the World Economic Forum in her new capacity. Congratulations, Geeta, on your new appointment, and thanks very much for joining us on CNBC TV 18. You've just presented the World Economic Outlook, and it looks bleaker than it did in 2018. In order of priority, what would be the most significant risk facing the global economy today?
There are two major risks. One would be an escalation in trade tensions, and the other would be a worsening in financial conditions. Because relative to 2018, what we've seen is that the two have become intertwined. And so that poses major risks to the global economy.
You know, Christine Lagarde talked about this new multilateralism, but clearly at this point in time, global leaders like President Trump don't think much of multilateral institutions or multilateral frameworks. So what hope do you have of this new multilateral order to take off?
We need to have cooperation. We need multilateral institutions to address many of the issues that we're facing. In fact, one of the things we point out in our outlook is that one of the immediate actions that need to be taken is for countries to come together and resolve the trade differences and do that quickly. So that is a very important factor that we require for growth to continue in the global economy.
But do you feel confident of that, especially in light of the conversations and negotiations that are on between the US and China? One day it seems like it's moving forward, the other day it looks like it's status quo. What's your own sense of being able to break through on some of these crucial trade negotiations?
So compared to our October 2018 outlook, if anything, there's been an improvement in the trade sentiment. So the G20 meeting in Buenos Aires, which was a coming together of US-China, trying to work out their trade differences. So those are pluses. There is uncertainty, there's no doubt about it, and that will remain, but we have to resolve this as soon as possible.
Brexit, and that is one of your most immediate key concerns for global growth as well as the global economy. How much lower do you see the forecast trending if you don't see trade negotiations between US and China kicking off in the manner that we expect and the Brexit uncertainty were to continue?
Those are two very important risks. We already talked about US and China. In the case of Brexit, our forecasts for the UK to stay in the free trade area and the transition to be smooth. If that changes and there is a costly no-deal Brexit, then that can have very important consequences for UK and therefore for the world economy.
Let me ask you a few questions on India now. 7.3%, that is the outlook as far as India is concerned for 18-19, slightly higher for 19-20. What would you be watching out for when it comes to the Indian economy, the next few triggers?
Indian growth is high. We still say that it is the highest growth rate for a large economy, so that's a big positive. The other positive is actually we forecast growth going up in 2019. And that's because of two factors: the lower commodity prices, and the other one is that we expect, because of the low commodity prices, the weaker impact on inflation, that monetary policy would be more neutral and more accommodative. Those are pluses. But going forward, I think that the big challenges for the Indian economy would be job creation and would be reforms for the agricultural sector.
This business of doubling farm income by 2022, which is the aspiration that the government has, as you look at where things stand today, do you believe that that is realistic? And what would the policy imperatives be in order for us to be able to get there?
There is a tremendous amount of distress in the agricultural sector. I believe that farm loan waivers don't solve the problem on any kind of a permanent basis. We certainly need to insure our farmers against very volatile food prices, but we also need to work with giving them better technology, better seeds, better...
An income support scheme?
A cash transfer would absolutely be better than loan waivers. It would be more broad-based and would keep the incentives aligned.
A universal basic income, and this was an idea that Arvind Subramaniam had touted in his economic survey. We don't know whether the government will do it or not, but do you believe that's a good idea? That should be something the government should consider?
The universal basic income in its original form is unlikely to be implemented in any developing country, because that implies giving money to every single citizen in the country, including the very richest. So, you know, the question is about targeting the most vulnerable parts of society, and there are many schemes already in place that try to do that, and we just have to make sure that it is more effective.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you about what you're seeing at the Reserve Bank of India, and the IMF did say that it was looking at the developments at the RBI very closely in light of Urjit Patel's resignation. There's now a capital framework committee that's been set up looking at the use of the RBI's capital reserves. How is the IMF looking at this issue?
We very strongly kind of call for operational independence of central banks. I mean, not just the RBI, but central banks all over the world. And that is very essential to maintain macroeconomic stability. You know, there is nothing wrong in having a committee set up to discuss issues that are relevant both to the central bank and to the government. But when it comes to important decisions on the operational side, it has to be independent.
But what should be the guiding parameters as this committee looks at the issue of capital reserves and whether the government should be able to access them or not, to your mind?
The question is that does the Reserve Bank have enough reserves to maintain macro stability for the economy? Reserves can be quite fickle, and they can change very quickly in a very short amount of time. So that has to be kept in mind.
There's a clamour in India for a repo as well as a CRR cut. The previous governor didn't believe that CRR cut was an adequate tool, especially when it comes to liquidity management. But what's your take given the global context and where things stand in India?
I mean, we do not prescribe very specific policy instruments for any country, and that would be up to the Reserve Bank of India to decide on that.
Have you had a conversation with Raghuram Rajan? He was the chief economist at the IMF as well, and of course you know him really well. Any words of advice that he may have given you? Any conversation that the two of you have had?
Raghu has been a great friend and mentor for many years, and so yes, we've been talking, and he's always given me great advice.
Geeta, always a pleasure. Appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV 18. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you,
well, that's Geeta Gopinath, the chief economist at the IMF. For now, it's back to you.
Well, the global financial stability, the trade tensions and Chinese slowdown, the three key risks outlined by Geeta Gopinath of IMF. But here's the other big story that is dominating conversations in Davos, and that is China's economic slowdown, which is now official. In 2018, the economy grew at 6.6%, which is the slowest pace of growth in nearly 3 decades. The Chinese government has been calling this a managed slowdown, and markets seem to be buying that, with most Asian indices ending in the green even after this growth data was released. China is also engaged in a trade spat with the United States, which has come as a double whammy, with consumer confidence already on the wane. CNBC's Eunice Yoon reports from Beijing on the latest GDP data and how Chinese officials are reacting to it.
The Chinese Statistics Bureau attempted to put a positive spin on the numbers, saying that China's growth is still stronger than Europe's, the US, or Japan's, and that this year would see reasonable growth. However, most economists expect the economy here to slide further, with Beijing stimulus measures kicking in by the second quarter at the earliest and more likely in the second half of the year. 2018 GDP was 6.6%, and growth in the fourth quarter indicated weakening momentum, coming in at 6.4%. Fixed asset investment missed, up 5.9% instead of the 6% that analysts were looking for. Real estate FAI growth slowed. Property is a big driver for the economy and an indicator for future construction activity. December factory output numbers and retail sales held up pretty well, up 5.7% and 8.2%, beating or meeting expectations, but still down compared to earlier in the year. One important data point for Beijing policymakers, unemployment. The jobless rate rose to 4.9% for December from 4.8% in November. Part of that is because of weakness in the export sector. Uncertainty triggered by the threat of U.S. tariffs caused some companies to delay investments and hiring. The Statistics Bureau said that Beijing would continue to roll out new measures to help stabilize the economy as authorities here battle what the Bureau described as an external environment that is complicated and difficult. Eunice Yoon, CNBC Business News, Beijing.
So China's economic slowdown could affect global growth in 2019 as well. The other big talking point at Davos is widening inequality. The latest report by global non-profit Oxfam shows that 26 richest people own as much wealth as the poorest 50% of humanity. In India, the richest 9 own as much wealth as the bottom 50% in the country. Oxfam is pitching for a 1% wealth tax, can raise over $400 billion, which is enough to educate every child in the world who is currently not in school and provide health care that can prevent 3 million deaths annually. The big development from courts, the Supreme Court has expanded the scope of investigation against Volkswagen. Following the 2015 global emissions scandal, or Dieselgate as it was called, the Supreme Court has said that they would leave it to the NGT to decide if other car makers should also be probed for possible violations of regulatory norms. Ashmit Kumar joins us now. Ashmit, tell us what happened in court and what will be the immediate implications for Volkswagen and how will this case progress in the days and months to come?
Well, for all effective purposes, it appears that the Apex Court has opened the door for the scrutiny of the NGT to be extended to all the other car makers with reference to the Dieselgate saga, with reference to compliance with the emission norms. Now, keep in mind that Volkswagen was the company that had moved the Apex Court in challenging the 100 crore rupee penalty that has been imposed by the NGT. And as an argument that Volkswagen counsels used, they essentially put forth before the Apex Court that the ARAI report that has been submitted before the NGT suggests that they are in compliance with the local emission norms, with the BS4 emission norms, and that with that in mind, their counsels argue that there is no case that has been made out for singling out of Volkswagen and why the other car companies should also not be subjected to similar scrutiny. Now, taking note of that, what the Apex Court today has done is that it has refused to pass any findings or judgments in this particular matter. It has, however, remanded the matter back to the NGT for considering what the future course of action could be. But with that, it has added an all-important caveat. The Apex Court has said that the NGT will be at liberty to consider if the scope of this investigation should be widened to other car companies. Having said that, the other takeaway, of course, also needs to be mentioned here. The Apex Court reprimanded the NGT for what it called was coercing Volkswagen into paying that penalty of 100 crore rupees. It said that it was neither proper nor appropriate for the NGT to have passed such orders, threatening even arrest of Volkswagen India officials, given as how the Apex Court had granted more time to the company to come back with the penalty. So that, of course, is the second aspect. But, of course, the big takeaway being that the scope of the investigation now possibly could be widened to other car companies as well. That's a question that the NGT will now have to answer. Back to you.
Oh, absolutely, Ashmit. The ball is now in NGT's court in that Dieselgate scandal. Many thanks for joining in. But moving on, CNBC TV 18 learns that Kotak Mahindra Bank may look at an out-of-court settlement with the Reserve Bank on the promoter shareholding matter. To remember, Kotak had earlier moved the Bombay High Court against the regulator after its promoter Uday Kotak was barred from reducing his stake in the bank through a preferential share issue. Sources say that the bank is in continuous talks with the RBI, where an out-of-court settlement is an option that the bank is currently looking at. Uday Kotak's current stake stands at 29.6% as against RBI's mandated 20% by December 31st of 2018. Now, in what comes as a fresh setback for debt-ridden IL&FS, rating agency CRISIL has downgraded the rating of debentures that have been issued by Jharkhand Road Project's implementation owned company from BBB to AA. Jharkhand Power, remember, is a special purpose vehicle owned by IL&FS Transportation, which is the infrastructure finance company that is now under the NCLT bankruptcy process. CRISIL says this downgrade is because of higher chances that the SPV will default on its debt payments following a change in stance of the company's management. Lata has more on what this downgrade means for the banks and the mutual fund investors. Lata.
Well, we need to understand that the SPV, that is Jharkhand Road Projects, has not yet defaulted. CRISIL has only brought it down from AA to BB. When they default, it will become D. But what CRISIL is telling us is that the management of Jharkhand Road Projects has changed its stance. Earlier, the expectation was IL&FS, the holding company, is in default, but various projects that it had financed were still able to meet their loan payments because they had escrowed amounts. That is, whatever toll money they would collect will go into a bank account, which is ring-fenced. And from that, they were paying the interest on debentures, bonds, and on loans. But now, Jharkhand Road Projects Management has written to IDBI trusteeship, which is its trustee, saying don't make any future payments. This is because the NCLAT in its October order, ordering the restructuring of IL&FS, had said that all the SPVs of all the subsidiaries of IL&FS should be part of the restructuring process. I don't know the exact legal language, but because Jharkhand Road Projects has written, now the expectation is that all other SPVs also will be told not to make payments till the overall restructuring is done. And therefore, chances are many banks which have lent to these SPVs will be forced to classify those loans as bad loans or as doubtful loans. Until now, they had only classified the holding company loans as bad loans. Likewise, mutual funds which own the debentures of these SPVs may also be forced to mark their paper down to D and therefore to zero value. This could create a bit of a problem. I just want to remind you, they are not yet in default, but they are soon expected to be in default.
All right. Thank you very much, Lata Venkatesh, for putting that story in perspective for our viewers. Let's move further. Initial 12 insolvency and bankruptcy cases should be behind us by the end of this fiscal. That's the word coming in from Corporate Affairs Secretary Jyoti Srinivas. Speaking to CNBC TV18's Timsi Japuria after a review of the cases under IBC, the Secretary also talked about the kind of patience lenders have shown so far in insolvency process and expressed hope that banks won't give up now.
We have taken a complete review, comprehensive review of all these cases and tried to identify where the bottlenecks are, why the delays are taking place. And broadly, with all stakeholders, we have been able to arrive at a very good strategy, a plan and approach to ensure that in the next 3 months or so, we should be able to bring them to a finality and put this Big 12 behind us. Because I think some of them I see as teething problems. There have been some teething problems. Some of these issues are part of the evolving process where some structural issues need to be addressed. But I think I'm very positive. I see a very strong possibility that the primary object of the code will be realized, and this will set the foundation for speedy resolution. And I expect that in future even that 180 days should suffice. You may not really have to stretch cases for an additional 90 days. So yeah, we are very positive.
The MCA secretary there saying that a lot of those last 12 cases might be resolved by March. Good news for banks, but on that note, we'll take a short break on the show. Coming up next, Finance Minister Jaitley hits out at the opposition's Grand Alliance plans, says the agenda for 2019 is Modi versus chaos. A special debate coming up on the other side.
Second stage tanks now pressurized. 30 seconds and counting. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Cadini. The power of presence. Cadini, Italy.
Automatic fittings make your furniture work beautifully. German quality you can trust.
बरसों से सोचा था पूरा तो हो, समझो हो गया, समझो हो गया।
बजाज आलियांज लाइफ गोल्ड प्लान्स के एक्सपीरियंस्ड इन्वेस्टमेंट मैनेजमेंट का साथ हो तो आप बस लाइफ गोल्ड प्लान करो, bajajalianzlife.com पर लॉग ऑन करो या हमारे इंश्योरेंस कंसल्टेंट से बात करो और बाकी
समझो हो गया।
Just 2 days after Mamata Banerjee and leaders from more than 20 opposition parties vowed to oust Narendra Modi in the general election, Finance Minister Arun Jaitley has hit out at the Mahagathbandhan in his blog, saying Agenda for 2019, Modi versus Chaos. That was the title of Jaitley's blog. He has asked in his blog whether 2019 will be a replica of 1971 when the Congress split and the opposition formed a grand coalition, despite which Indira Gandhi-led Congress won with a majority. He said negativism, an anti-Modi mindset and caste coalitions will not win the opposition and election. We'll go to our guest in just a bit, but he has focused on the twofold strategy of the opposition, saying negative anti-Modi agenda, and secondly, to combine as many political groups together so as to take the best advantage of the electoral arithmetic. He has also gone on to say the opposition is making Prime Minister Modi's continuation in office as a key political issue. We in the BJP welcome this agenda being set by the opposition. Let's go across to our guest now. Narendra Taneja of the BJP is with us. We'll be joined by Sanjay Jha of the Congress, Manisha Priyam, Ghanshyam Tiwari of the Samajwadi Party as well. Narendra Taneja, coming to you. In every opposition rally, farmers' distress, lack of jobs, Rafale deal, the state of the economy, demonetization, GST have been key issues. They were issues in Mamata Banerjee's rally as well. Arun Jaitley may have compared this election, 2019 election, to the one in 1971, but isn't the political scenario today, with strong regional players like TMC, TDP, TRS, Samajwadi Party, BSP, Biju Janata Dal, isn't today's political scenario very different from 1971 as well?
Well, the question is that if you think they are coming together, if you are referring to their electoral arithmetic, you know, the question is why are they coming together? And we saw in Calcutta very clearly. They don't have any agenda for the country. Their agenda is simple, just one, to oust Narendra Modi from power, to oust BJP out of power. So the question is that, you know, what is common? What is common between all these parties? There in Calcutta, it was actually Mamata ji all the way. She wants to be the Prime Minister. What's her track record? There is no democracy in West Bengal. There is no development in West Bengal. She has no vision for West Bengal. You see on the ground, you know, West Bengal is reduced to be like a, you know, a south of Sahara state. That's the kind of situation there. You want her, India wants her to be the Prime Minister. Were they all there because, and why Rahul Gandhi ji didn't go? Why Mayawati ji didn't go? Why? So there are questions.
All right, Narendra Taneja there saying that the opposition, Mahagathbandhan, has no common agenda, there is no common leader. And Sanjay Jha, that is the question for the Congress. Rahul Gandhi, KCR, Mayawati did not share stage with Mamata Banerjee. They all sent their representatives. Clearly, all these big leaders are not comfortable accepting each other's leadership. That's why you don't see them individually in each other's events. Doesn't that go to show that this will make things difficult? If 2019 is a presidential contest, then who will be that common leader?
India is going to have a non-BJP Prime Minister of the Mahagathbandhan in 2019 May. The Mahathagbandhan, which is what the Narendra Modi-led alliance is the reality. Look at the state of the BJP today. It's like a sinking Titanic. You know, everybody is deserting them. At last count, out of the 40 people who are part of the NDA, 18 have left them. There are more on the way.
But the question is, some of your own allies, H.D. Kumaraswamy, for one, the Chief Minister of Karnataka, he was present in this rally, and he said that Mamata Banerjee has all the makings, she has all the merits for the position of Prime Minister, for leading this grand coalition, for leading the country. Now, what does that show?
Well, I'll tell you, Parikshit, what it shows. It shows that there is absolutely no talent deficit in the proposed Mahagathbandhan. I'll give you an example. Mr. Stalin of the DMK has endorsed Mr. Rahul Gandhi as a Prime Minister. By the way, Mr. Devegowda, has said Mr. Rahul Gandhi will make an excellent Prime Minister as well. So, but what did we say from the Congress party? And I say so here as a responsible spokesperson of my party. We believe that the prime ministerial phase is the least of the problems. You have the BJP today, which under Modi and Amit Shah have virtually destroyed this country. I mean, it's not just the economy or, foreign policy or national security. Look at the state of society. Look at the pressure on minorities, the Dalits, and the state of the institutions like RBI, CBI, Supreme Court.
Let's get Manisha Priya.
The two of them have to be the worst combination India has ever seen. From the time of Gandhi and Nehru, we have come down to Amit Shah.
The choice of prime ministerial candidate is the least of the worries. There are many big issues that are being talked about right now, and therefore, this opposition coalition does not need to choose a leader. Will that help?
So I would argue on two counts. I think that Mr. Sanjay Jha is indeed correct, but for reasons more than what he's just said. Remember, Parikshit, India is not a presidential system, and the 2019 Lok Sabha elections will be held to elect legislatures. Remember, it's always the legislature party. So you can do a political advertisement, you can do a political campaign saying, this is my chehra. Unless that chehra is procedurally taken to the floor of the parliament, legislatures elect. No Prime Minister of India is elected without the legislature party meeting, proposing and electing. So it is not for the people of India to elect the President of India. We are not that kind of system. And therefore the chehra or the candidate is not important at this point of time. Second, the esteemed colleague from the BJP mentioned that on the stage X was not present, Y was not present. Look, that doesn't matter. Look at the number of people present. And remember, the narrative soon after the Mahagathbandhan or big meeting that happened, Brigade Mahadiveshan as it was called locally, the channels in the regional news changed. This was largely a coalition or a presence of, largely I would say, not completely, largely a presence, a strong presence of regional parties. The Congress party did not say no, it sent Mallikarjun Kharge, who is the leader of the opposition in the Lok Sabha. He sits on statutory committees where the leader of the opposition goes. He's a leader of stature from the state of Karnataka and also a representative, very importantly, of Dalit leadership in that state. So Mallikarjun Kharge was there. So to that extent, I would say that no important party that is opposed to the BJP was unrepresented on the dais.
Jaitley also said, vote transferability in such caste coalitions is not so simple. Local chemistries react differently. Many of these combinations end up as theoretical propositions.
I'm absolutely surprised on how a government that has so-called top leadership, powerful leadership, and has said they have worked, has reduced itself at the cabinet minister level to political analysts. Arun Jaitley has become the new political analyst. I have a newspaper that says, if Modi voted out anarchy, Javadekar. So when cabinet ministers, we had Mr. Athawale in Lucknow saying that it would be better for BSP to align with BJP. When cabinet ministers of a government that should tell their performance in the run-up to election start becoming political analysts, it means that they have already lost the plot.
Sanjay Jha, Narendra Taneja, Manisha Priyam and Ghanshyam Tiwari, thank you very much for joining us.
Time for a short break on that note, but coming up next, the Income Tax Department denies reports that it has issued notices to several small companies for delaying TDS deposits. Dinesh Kanabar and Sudhir Kapadia will be joining us to discuss this when we return. Welcome back. Now, the big story from the tax space then. The Income Tax Department has denied reports which claim that the taxman had issued prosecution notices to several small companies for delaying TDS deposits. Now, denying these charges, the Central Board of Direct Taxes, or CBDT, has said that it had issued prosecution notices in 50 big cases in the past 1 month. And these notices have been issued in cases where the tax deducted at source has been deducted but not deposited with the government. To discuss the controversy over the TDS notices, I have with me Dinesh Kanabar, CEO of Dhruva Advisors. Mr. Kanabar, thank you very much for joining in. Your first reaction, 50 prosecution notices in 1 month. Doesn't it seem a bit aggressive?
Two parts. First is that when a tax is deducted at source and not paid to the tax office, you are really looking at a situation where a revenue is due to the government and somebody has not paid it to the government. And obviously that's a situation where the government needs to protect its base. The government cannot allow a situation where an amount due to it is not paid over to it. So that's something which we need to recognize first and foremost. Second, there are circulars and there are situations which have been provided, like for example, there are de minimis exclusions to issue of a prosecution notice. There are situations in which people can get into compounding. That said, has the vigilance of the government on this part increased? Absolutely. The fact that the vigilance has increased is something which is commendable, because in a sense the government needs to protect its own interest. What we need to debate is slightly different as to whether, if there are minor delays, if there are small delays, whether a more lenient view is taking. I wouldn't really go by the number of prosecutions as to 50 in 1 month being large or less, because that really depends on what the government finds in its check, and whether, if the government finds that there are so many cases where the amounts due have not been paid, the government is bound to take action.
You know, Mr. Kanabar, the government, the CBDT has issued a statement saying that vested interests are at play. They're trying to mislead people with these prosecutions. But they're also saying that in a country of 130 crore people, where 6 crore returns are filed annually, 1,400 prosecutions cannot be called mass harassment.
Hello.
Yeah, Mr. Kanabar, if you could hear my question. The CBDT has said that in a country of 130 crore people, where 6 crore returns are filed annually. Yeah. So how do you respond to that? Because the government is saying that this is not mass harassment.
Again, you know, we are putting things out of context. I don't think the population of the country, the number of taxpayers is really relevant. There are two situations which one needs to look at. If there is a quota which has been given to the tax office, as a result of which prosecution is happening, that is not what is warranted. On the other hand, if prosecution is happening because government's interest needs to be protected, that's something which is relevant. So the fact whether there are 1,400 prosecutions or even 5,000 prosecutions, if people, so two situations. One is a situation where people do not deduct taxes, which is required to be. Second is a situation where you deduct taxes. That means that you have to pay somebody 100 rupees. You have to deduct 10. You pay 90 to the recipient. 10 you withheld because it was to be paid to the government. And you do not pay it to the government. Would not the government issue a prosecution notice, because that's the amount which you are withholding for and on behalf of the government, but you are not handing over to the government. So admittedly, there is no dispute here. There can be a case where there is a dispute between the taxpayer and the revenue. That's a separate issue. Here, admittedly, you as a payer deducted tax. You kept it with yourself to be paid over to the government, and you did not pay to the government. If you did not do that, then you got to be prosecuted. I don't know what it has got to do with the population of the country, whether it is persecution, vested interest. I'm not in a position. I'm purely on a position of law, that if the money is payable to the government have not been paid, the government is entitled to take action to recover its dues. So, however, that if there is a de minimis non-compliance or if there is a marginal error, prosecution should not be resorted to.
Absolutely, we take your point, and it is commendable that the government is getting more vigilant. But, just to put things in perspective, what is the usual time lag between TDS collection and depositing with the government, which seems to be the case where a lot of, people are now being sent notices over delays. So what kind of delay is acceptable?
So, there are different timelines which are prescribed. So take, for example, salary. All of us receive salary, and the government is required to make the payment of the TDS by the 7th of the following month. So you are given 7 days time. You paid salary on 30th, but you got to deduct your tax, got to pay the tax over to the government by the 7th of the following month. There are certain compliances which are monthly, quarterly, etc. Now, if there is, the proposition is that if instead of paying the tax on 7th, for any reason you paid it on 8th or 9th, maybe because you did not receive information, you are operating all over the country, some information did not come in, could you be held for prosecution? The answer is absolutely no, you should not be prosecuted. Similarly, if you are a small taxpayer and there is a minimal delay, would you be really prosecuted for that? If there is an inadvertent oversight, should you be prosecuted? The answer is no. If, however, for example, you deduct tax on salary and you do not pay it over for months, then should the government prosecute you? The answer has to be yes.
You know, also, we believe that the Bombay Chartered Accountants Society has made a representation before the Revenue Secretary. What is their point of view? What should be the best way forward?
Yeah, and I think that representation is very, very well founded. There are two parts again to that representation. One is on the quantum and the other is on the period of delay. So if there are small taxpayers who really are not conscious of their obligation, or there is a marginal delay, a 10,000 rupee, a 5 lakh rupee, a tax has not been paid, it does not really jeopardize government's position, in which case prosecution ought not to happen. Similarly, if there are, as I said, there is a delay by a couple of days, then that ought to be condoned. I think the concern really which comes up is that there is an attempt being made by the revenue officials to deny what otherwise can be compounded and to jack up the ability to compound. And that is what is something which is being resisted. So that representation in itself is something which is absolutely well made. However, to blow it out to say that the government should not prosecute people who have not paid over monies may not necessarily be an appropriate response.
Absolutely, Mr. Kanabar, and therefore, you know, the penalty for delay in depositing these taxes that are collected, they range from 3 months to up to 7 years. Is that justifiable?
No, you're talking about the, you're not referring to the penalty, you are referring to the term of imprisonment, is it?
Yes, yes, for not depositing these TDSs if the government finds. Yeah.
Correct. So those are the provisions of law which have specifically provided as to whether, what is the period. So there is a period which is there is a specific provision for compounding. Compounding is a provision where instead of being prosecuted, you agree to pay a penalty, you compound, which means you have argued without an iota of doubt, violated the provision of law. However, having violated the provision of law, you are now willing to pay compounding charges, which is a penalty. There are circumstances under which compounding charges are payable. If you fulfill those, and those compounding charges are pretty steep, if you fulfill those compounding and pay those compounding charges, then prosecution does not lie. If, however, you are not eligible for compounding, you are a repeat offender, then there is a prosecution. And the law itself provides then as to what is the term of imprisonment. Now, everywhere in the world, white-collar crimes are something which are being seriously prosecuted against by the government. It's not peculiar to India. And again, I go back to the same proposition that if somebody has got government's monies, which is without doubt payable to the government, and it does not pay to the government, then subject to de minimis threshold and subject to sufficient period threshold, the government should actually ensure that it collects its legitimate dues.
Right, Mr. Kanabar. We also have Sudhir Kaparia joining in. Quickly, Mr. Kaparia, since we're running short on time, you know, your take, 50 prosecution notices in under a month and thousands in 2018. Is the tax, tax collector being overzealous?
So I think in some instances they have possibly been overzealous, because the simple point is that if tax has been deducted at source and there has been a delayed payment for inadvertent reasons, the focus should be on recovering that tax with interest at least. And once that is done, it's a more civil issue. In earlier law, at least provided that if there is a serious delay of over a year, then you launch prosecution proceedings. That was removed for whatever reasons, and therefore you do have some officers really, surging ahead and issuing notices even for delays which are as low as 2 to 3 days. So which is, I think, really going overboard.
So, Sudhir, you feel that what we've seen in the last 1 year, prosecutions being launched for minor defaults, the situation is unusual, and what do you think is the reason for this? A lot of media reports have referred to a letter by the CBDT chairman to their cadre.
No, so I think the overall letter, the letter dealt overall with, targets, etc. But I don't think that's the point. The point is that the law does not prevent a tax officer from launching prosecution proceedings whenever a TDS amount has not been deposited in time. So it's not that the actions are per se without the sanction of law. But the point which one is making is as follows. Number one, this kind of action should not be taken where ultimately the tax is anyway paid, that too within a reasonable period of time. As I said, there have been instances where even within a month's delay, you have had notices issued for prosecution. By the way, there are notices. It's not that people have been sent to jail. But once notices are issued, then you have to give submissions. Matters keep on piling up for amounts which are relatively very trivial. So the point one is making is that the purpose will be best served if you bring back the rule to say, look, please launch prosecution proceedings where there are serious delays so that the mala fide is established that somebody is not wanting to pay back to the government. And for the rest of them, especially where assessees have themselves voluntarily paid, even before notices are issued or this has been brought to their attention, what is the purpose served afterwards in serving notices and say, no, but you had delayed payments? Even if you have paid interest and penalty, we don't have the right not to prosecute you. So we will issue notices, then you go to court and then get it quashed. So this is what has been happening in a few cases. I agree it is not wholesale in a few cases, but that's entirely avoidable.
All right, so that overzealousness is entirely avoidable. Thank you very much for joining in, Mr. Sudhir Kapadia and Mr. Dinesh Kanabar, in bringing much needed clarity to this discussion. Many thanks for your time. But on that note, we'll slip into another short break. Coming up next, Bajaj Auto launches a new avatar of its Hamara Bajaj campaign. Details on the other side. The big global story then, British Prime Minister Theresa May has categorically ruled out calls for a second Brexit referendum. In a speech at the Parliament, May said that the second vote will set a bad precedent and she expects a majority of lawmakers to reject such a proposal. Asking for more cooperation from the MPs, Theresa May said she hopes to find the broadest possible consensus. Now, these statements come just days after her proposal for a Brexit deal with the EU was overwhelmingly rejected by the Parliament. British opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn slammed Theresa May and accused her of being in denial.
To be clear, this is not a rerun of the vote to ratify the agreement we have reached with the European Union, but the fulfilment of the process following the House's decision to reject that motion. The process of engagement is ongoing. In the next few days, my ministerial colleagues and I will continue to meet with members on all sides of the House and with representatives of the trade unions, business groups, civil society and others as we try to find the broadest possible consensus on a way forward. Whilst I will disappoint those colleagues that hope to secure a second referendum, I do not believe that there is a majority in this House for such a path. And whilst I want to deliver a deal with the EU, I cannot support the only other way in which to take no deal off the table, which is to revoke Article 50. So my focus continues to be on what is needed to secure the support of this House in favour of a Brexit deal with the EU.
Back home, Bajaj Auto today launched its new avatar with a new campaign reflecting the company's global ambitions and its rapid growth in global markets. The auto major has now branded itself the world's favorite Indian. Bajaj Auto's MD, Rajiv Bajaj, explained the thought behind this new campaign in a candid conversation with the press earlier today. We also spoke to Rakesh Sharma, who is the executive director of Bajaj Auto, who told us that the company would be launching electric vehicles across segments in this financial year. He also batted for a lower GST rate, keeping in mind that you have new safety norms coming into place, BS6 norms coming into place from next year, and the new insurance norms are also putting a burden on the industry. They also spoke about global tie-ups. Take a look at this conversation.
I think to be the best means to be global, to be world-class. So if we are a company that exports a significant percentage of its production to countries across the globe, then I would believe that we are the best, or we are one of the best two-wheeler companies. With that thought as a catalyst, we've been doing some work, and the last 10-12 years have seen that work come to some fruition. You may be surprised to know, in calendar year 2018, for the first time, we exceeded an export of 2 million vehicles to 70 countries across the world, representing a little more than 40% of our production.
Hamara Bajaj, as you know, which came decades ago, was such an iconic campaign, and it got embedded in the very fabric of our society, and it cast a long shadow over our narrative for decades to come. And this was happening when Bajaj was itself transforming away from the Hamara Bajaj, you know, that the time has now come to decisively, forcefully take control of the narrative and try to present back to the public more authentically Bajaj in what it is actually today. And today it is indeed the world's favorite Indian.
All right, with that, we wrap up this edition of India Business Hour. But before we go, we're just a little over 10 days from Budget 2019. And as we count down, North Block has marked the beginning of the budget document printing with the customary halwa ceremony, after which officials who are directly associated with the budget making and printing are cut off from their families till the presentation of the budget.